Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtuarena. Today we're going to be creating the best trading platform ever. So we've brought in 3 guest speakers that cover all parts of the system to find out what each part can bring. So joining me from Cisco, I have Daniel Brown and also Milan Dvorak from Netcope and Adam Lister from Blackcore. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here today. Before we start the session, I'm going to go around and get everyone to introduce themselves. So Adam, can I ask you, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you, Doug. How are you getting on?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant and looking forward to the session. Adam, could you give us a bit of background to Blackcore, please?
Certainly. Blackcore are a high-frequency trading server vendor based out of the UK with about 5 or 6 years of real-world industry experience. I represent the solution architecture side of the business and have 10 years HFT and HPC infrastructure experience, working with clients and vendors and technology partners, such as my colleagues here today, to develop and deploy trading platforms in exchanges around the world.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Adam. I'm looking forward to hearing more about from you and Blackcore. Now, Milan, also, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. All is well here in Czech Republic.
Oh, absolutely excellent. So, Milan, could you give us a bit of background to Netcope as well, please?
Sure. In short, we develop FPGA-based tick-to-date applications, and we've been doing that for over 9 years now. What's interesting is that most of our clients don't have any previous FPGA experience and no hardware designers in-house, but they are still able to program their trading strategies into the FPGA, basically like software using C, C++ language, while still achieving latencies in nanoseconds. So we basically act as an enabler for companies who want to use FPGAs but can't for various reasons.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much. It's such a critical part of the going on from that end of the chain. So, but right there at the heart of it, we also have Dan Brown from Cisco. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much. How are you?
Yes, really super actually on this Friday. So yeah, looking forward to cracking on. Dan, people might already be aware with Cisco, I feel, but can you tell us a bit more about what you've been working on in particular, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm Daniel Brown, technical solutions architect at Cisco. I'm part of the ultra latency division. So what we actually are responsible for is a bunch of different smart NICs that are based on FPGA platforms, as well as some high performance and low latency switches that run between layer 1 all the way up to layer 4 in the stack. But I think today's focus is probably going to be more on the smart NIC side.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you so much, guys. Well, to kick things off then, we, as mentioned in the intro, we're going to be creating the perfect trading platform for others to kind of learn from and kind of get those ingredients that are going to be so critical going forward. So Dan, if I could actually stick with you then, in your experiences, what do you see as kind of being the most sought after features that people are really starting to realize they need for their platforms?
Yeah, sure. So the primary objective, I guess, as part of a trading system is to take as much away from the CPU. So one of the slowest parts inside of, I guess, the TCP transaction with an exchange is actually the process between the NIC card to the CPU itself. So what we're able to do with the Smart NIC product or with an FPGA is we can actually take a lot of the software, as Milan said earlier now, and program it directly into the FPGA. So any of the orders, any of the TCP transmits can be sent directly from the FPGA without having to do any calls to the CPU. I think that's one of the biggest things that we're probably seeing in the modern day. So traditionally, the software apps were all running in the CPU. You'd run your order entry engine directly from there, and then there'd be quite a big delay in the order of magnitude of microseconds to go between the application and the NIC card itself. So I think we've kind of done away with that with some of the technologies that have been developed from both Cisco as well as Netcope, as well as Exacta with the Blackcore technology, to minimize that as much as possible.
Incredible. Now, you brought up Netcode there as well, being on that software side and how that's critical. So, Milan, could I also get you to chime in and kind of get your perspective when it comes to the most important features?
I think Dan was right on point when he said that we want to move as much from CPU as possible, move it down to hardware, to FPGAs, because that's how you can get the lowest latency possible. I think the bottom line is that the FPGAs are so fast that by the time the standard software even learns about a new message, new event on the exchange, by the time the FPGA is able to process the incoming data, execute the strategy, prepare the response back to the exchange, and send it onto the wire. So if you want to be deterministically always faster than your competition, this is how to do it. If you have the full tick-to-trade pipeline in the FPGA, you are always faster than the guys staying in software because of the blocker of the PCIe and DMA transfers.
Interesting. Now, sorry, please continue.
I was going to say that that being said, I think the CPU part is still important, because while you want to move as much as possible to FPGA, you don't want to move everything, because that would actually make the FPGA clogged and unnecessarily slow. Plus, we've been told by our customers that the latency between FPGA and software is still important. Sometimes you want to adjust your logic into the FPGA, adjust some parameters, just fine-tune it on the fly. And the lower the latency between FPGA and software, the more you can do, the more you can be aggressive with your strategies. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is where Adam comes in. With their overclocked servers, I believe they can bring the latency between FPGA and software even lower.
Yes, thanks, Milan. Thank you for bringing the server back into the conversation a little bit. That's nice. Of course, it's important to have a host for your FPGA, for your software, and for your logic on that FPGA. And whilst CPU core frequencies are extremely important, we also optimize everything around that CPU socket. So we are tuning cache frequencies, we're optimizing the PCIe bus to be as low latency as possible to ensure that the whole solution is as low latency as possible, not just what's on the FPGA or not just what's in memory.
Yeah, you really are at the kind of the beginning of the whole system. And if, Adam, I think it's fair to say, if the server isn't concentrated on, then everything else kind of doesn't follow suit. Now, one thing I think that's been the reason we're all here today really is because the industry, when it comes to high frequency trading, has entered into this race towards zero. So, Adam, if I could stick with you then, how do you think this race to zero has been changing market dynamics and creating this kind of innovative sector?
I'd say in the last few years, we've seen, from a CPU perspective, a leveling off in terms of raw clock frequency. As the re-adoption of FPGA and the increases in IPC are coming along, we've had to move to optimizing everything around the socket, not just the core frequencies that I mentioned before. We're seeing great results in terms of latency reduction in areas that might not have been addressed with previous server generations. And that's where we see our focus. It's been a little bit challenging with some clients who are asking us to integrate bigger and more power-hungry devices, but thankfully the Cisco SmartNICs aren't too power and resource hungry.
Yeah, Dan, can we get your input on that? Because obviously, having that aspect of being at these almost picosecond kind of levels of speed, the network must be absolutely airtight and quick. Can you tell us a bit more about your input on that, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so as you say, there is picosecond resolution as well as granularity on majority of the Cisco cards these days. So on our standard deployment NICs, you've got a resolution down to 4 nanoseconds with an extremely high % hit rate. we utilize the kernel bypass features between both Linux and Windows stack into the card to bypass the standard operating system stack. As you say, extremely power hungry. And depending on the type of card that you're utilizing, we've got the X25 and the X100, which are more of the deployment cards, which most of our customers are using on broad scale. And then I guess the one that is our latest and greatest is the Speed Grade 3 of our V9P, which is currently just been deployed actually. So Milan's gonna be taking that and tinkering and I guess putting his interest in IP on it with our FDK
in a Blackcore server, hopefully.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, Milan, I'd like to hear, your perspective on that in terms of, obviously Dan's kind of thrown down the gauntlet in terms of, now it's up to Netcope to kind of really take all this kind of all this innovation and really expand upon it from the software side of things. Can you tell me a bit more about what Netcode can do in that regard then?
First, maybe let me give a quick kudos to Cisco, because they actually make for us they make adopting these new innovations easier and time to market shorter. I think it also illustrates the point that the FPGA industry in general has been moving through a commoditization phase in the recent years. Just the plain fact that the Cisco are now working with FPGA cards, proves the point that it's becoming not the standard, but almost a commodity. If you can buy the FPGA NIC from Cisco and not just small companies like Exablaze a couple of years ago. So we've seen this as a big shift in the industry, and the fact that Cisco offers FDK, which stands for Firmware Development Kit, which is the same or compatible between all their platforms or all their smart NICs, really helps us to be flexible and to quickly bring our IP onto the new platform and push it to the client sooner. So with this new card coming up, it's been just deployed, and we already have clients lined up for the new card, because it will be faster by, I think, at least 10 to 15%, maybe more. They won't have to wait for us to finish our development and handle all the portation and moving our IP to the new platform, because the work has basically already been done. So right now we're just waiting for the actual hardware to be shipped. So these are certainly exciting times to be in. I think the rate of innovation is accelerating, which is great.
Incredible. And now all these innovations kind of ultimately come back and begin and end at the server. So Adam, can I ask, from the Blackcore kind of perspective, what's the importance of cooling now that we are having that race to zero? I imagine there's so much pressure put on these servers now. So can you tell me a bit more about what Blackcore does and what liquid cooling servers are going to do for organizations going forward?
Sure. So our headline figures of 5.4 gigahertz and things like that only tell a part of the story. So most of our Blackcore systems are liquid cooled, as you say, and that enables us to maintain a more consistent temperature across the whole system, not just the CPU core temperatures. And what that does is it reduces the amount of thermal throttling that happens in the CPUs. If you have a more consistent temperature, you have a more consistent performance. And that in turn creates a more predictable performance for your software and for your FPGA. And if there's a more stable platform for your FPGA and your software, you're going to get better results on your trading platform. Our liquid cooling, some data centers get a little bit scared about the word liquid, but ours is all self-contained within the chassis and designed and manufactured in our factory in the UK.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's something that, as someone that is not too connected to the industry, when you're always taught that mixing water and electronics never goes. So it's interesting to hear that it's actually going to be so critical going forward. And does liquid cooling effectively allow for future-proofing the ability to make sure that these servers can still run at a proper temperature? I mean, or what? Because as you said, it's manufactured. Is it a once it's been installed, it's then at that temperature going forward?
It's designed to be maintenance-free for the lifetime of the system. So it's designed to give you lower temperatures for your production workload for 3 years, if it's a 3-year life cycle for that box. In real-world customer testing that we did recently, we had a 15 degrees Celsius reduction moving from air-cooled to liquid-cooled in the same data center, in the same rack unit. And that enables them to run at higher frequencies because there's less thermal throttling. And that elevates us above the competition just simply by being cooler in both terms of the word, I suppose.
Incredible. Now, once you've got that basis and that ability to keep your servers cool, I guess you move down the chain, and people who are looking to create this trading platform then have to look at kind of connecting their trading system with the actual network itself. So, Dan, I've got to come to you with this. We've brought up having FPGA technology-based NICs, but I'm really excited to hear kind of what it can actually do for these organizations that go for those rather than just typical ASICs.
Yeah, sure. So I guess one of the best parts about the Smart NIC is that it's future-proofed. As the question you posed to Adam a moment ago, it's future-proofed in such a way that the FPGA code can be rewritten. So you can take the code blocks or the firmware, you can redeploy that and change the whole aspect of the card. So you can change the whole clock inside of the Mac and Fire. You can change the rate of the data that can be ingested. Due to the way that the X25 and the X100 have been physically designed, we're going to be future-proofed from a bandwidth perspective as well. So we'll be able to do the 1, 10, 25 gigs going forward, as well as we have the QSFP variant. So in theory, we could take 100 gig link as well. Not that we can today, but we could going forward. So when you've got an ASIC, you have to respin the ASIC when you want to make any type of hardware or technology development. Whereas all we have to do here is rewrite some more code, we deploy that onto the card, and you're ready for the next 2 to 3 years of your company's life cycle.
I think that's absolutely incredible, and it's something that we seem to be hitting on through each stage of creating this trading platform, is that future-proofed element. And I think that's going to be so critical for all these organizations that are looking to scale up, because I can imagine, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, implementing these ASICs, if they're not future-proofed and you can't then amend them, that's got to be quite expensive, right?
Yeah. So it very much depends on the type of features you want to actually deploy within an ASIC. So this is how I usually would classify the difference. So when you've got an ASIC, you need to go away and spend, 3 months, 1 year, 2 years deciding the type of features that you're going to want inside of your board or inside of the actual chip. Whereas when you've got an FPGA, you say, right, here's the I/O, here's the frequencies it can run at, here's the throughput across the whole chip. Then the possibilities are endless, because if we slot that into the middle of one of our cards, like we have done, we can change the whole aspect of the card. So we don't have to sit there and say, right, well, in 2023, we need to make sure that this card is going to be able to support 100 gig. However, if we make sure it supports 100 gig, we need to redact from the features we have now, because we haven't actually got enough space. Whereas with an FPGA, we've got 2021's version of the firmware. 2022's come out where we've introduced a new feature set and maybe depreciated some older legacy features and made more room. So it's just ever growing, really. As long as you've chosen a decent chip on a decent card, which I'd like to think Cisco has done, then we can make it faster.
Incredible. Now, speaking of that speed, and Milan as a company and organization that works on these FPGAs, the Cisco FPGAs, can you tell me what can that technology actually do when it comes to the speed?
I think touched upon this subject in the beginning when I did the comparison with software and the FPGA response before even software gets the data. So that's clear. That's what the FPGA has been used for the past couple of years. Just the aggressive ultra low latency for the trades, for the responses. But I think like last year and a half, with all the crazy stuff that's been going on in the world and how crazy markets behaved, how much the loads and amount of data and everything spiked. That really showed that software, even if overclocked, if it gets a microburst, a big load of data, the latency can go significantly higher, because the software needs to buffer, and suddenly you get these tails that are quite bad for your business. Whereas FPGAs, Daniel mentioned that the current FPGA cards will be able to handle 100 gigabits per second in the future. And so today, when most of the exchanges are still running at 10 gigabits per second, it's easy peasy for an FPGA. So there is no buffering. The FPGA is just streamline processing all the data, and basically that your latency is going to be constant and deterministic, even during microbursts or even during whatever happens in the market, even if the physical link is hurling data at you as fast as it can, still the latency on the FPGA is the same. So I think the trading companies have really appreciated this feature recently, that even when something unexpected happens, you can still get reliable performance and latency. That's the beauty of this hardware, of this technology, actually.
Yeah, and with that in mind, then, before Milan, we move on to the next part of the chain. Adam, if I could come back to you and talk about overclocking and how in this industry that's going to start becoming more commonplace, and where does Blackcore kind of sit in being able to enable organizations to really run at those speeds?
So it comes back to the cooling again. The cooler you are, the faster you can run. And if you have workloads such as algorithmic trading and automated trading, you want those single threads to be as fast as possible. So we have core counts. We start with as low as 8 if you want 5.4 gigahertz, and we can go all the way up to 28 cores in a single socket with 4.5 gigahertz. So there's a range of options there for as many threads as you want to give to your down to your FPGA and down to your devices.
With that in mind, then, Milan, if I could come back to you, and obviously we've heard about the race to zero. It's putting stress on the hardware, but also I imagine it's putting stress on a kind of talent side of things as well. People being able to have to write that software going forward. So can you tell me a bit more about what Netcope does in this space and how you enable these trading platforms to actually not have to worry about that and just continue to future-proof and take advantage of that hardware?
Great question. We've heard this a lot recently, when talking to CTOs and the heads of trading, that they would like to deploy on a new exchange, deploy a new strategy, just do more with their FPGAs, but they can't really, because the internal development teams are so busy. And it's not really easy to hire new people, because everyone wants to hire these days. It seems like we've been asked this a lot also, like, do you know any free developers, or do you know anyone who's looking to be hired? Well, the answer is always no, right? The current market. So basically, the CTOs are looking for ways how to do more with less, how to be more efficient with their developments. And I think this is when our approach, comes in place. The methodology, the technology is called HLS, high-level synthesis. It's been around for quite some time, but we feel like it has really matured in the past few years, and now it can do two things for you. It can make programming FPGAs, faster, more efficient. So a single developer can do more work, put basically more code into the FPGA. That's one thing. The other thing is that it can also expand your FPGA team, because now you can add software guys into the mix. They don't need to understand the RTL, Verilog, the specialized languages. And basically you can offload upload, implementing new strategy to a software guy, who is using our framework, our application. We provide the boring IP blocks for feed parsing and the processing of protocols. Software guy can write the strategy that the trader desires very much in C++, load it into the FPGA card, and then everyone is happy, right? The trader, gets to expand to new markets, new strategies.
So Milan, I've actually got a question for yourself.
Go ahead.
So we know about RTL language, and we know that that's obviously the language that will be used to program the FPGA card to do what it needs to do. But you've talked about the high-level synthesizer, but are you able to tell me, I guess, a little bit more about the performance metrics in terms of the difference between writing directly inside of RTL and writing in C++ and then converting using a HLS?
That's a good question and a common concern that our clients have. We have quite a long experience with HLS, so there are certainly bad ways to do this and ways that leads to high latencies and inefficient code. But over the years, we built like a guidelines document that shows how to write efficient C or C++ code for FPGAs. It can be a little bit counterintuitive for software guys, but our clients have proven that if you change your mindset slightly, you still write C, you write it slightly differently, and you can achieve great results. Often the latency is basically the same. In some complex cases, the latency can in fact be better. If the system is complex, the compiler can find ways to optimize and run things in parallel better than a normal human being, I would say. Sometimes what happens is that the HLS code takes more space, like it creates more logic to do the same. But since the FPGA chips are increasing in size every day due to Moore's law and innovation in general, this is becoming less and less of a problem. So our clients don't mind using HLS and C++2 code strategies into the FPGA because it gives them great performance and much better efficiency, scalability, and also like independency on the vendor. Like they can rewrite strategies by themselves in-house without talking to some FPGA guys and asking for help or something like that. So it can definitely work if approached the right way.
Excellent. Now, guys, one thing that seems quite apparent and what we realized when we were prepping for this session was to create this platform, you really need the best in class in each step of the system, don't you? So Dan, if I could come to you, like, how is this this kind of model going to go forward, and is it even possible nowadays for an organization to just go to one vendor and just kind of try and carry it all, or is this something that we're now going to see in the industry? You have to kind of pick and choose the best in class each way. Yeah,
it's a very good point, right? So Cisco have traditionally been the best in class in terms of network performance, as well as bandwidth. We now have the SmartNIC lineup, which is actually the fastest NIC card available in the market right now. But then when combined in partnership with other vendors such as Blackcore for the servers, creating the best in class from a compute side of things, and Netcope with their tick to trade and market gateways, you can create, I guess, the best in class trading platform overall. So I think the future is definitely inside of partnerships. I think people need to define what they're going to do best and then work with others to then build upon those efforts, because it's too hard to be a jack of all trades and be the master of none. Yeah, and guys, I'd like to hear your input as well. Adam, if we start with you, do you agree in that you kind of have to pick and choose the best there?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Dan. We prefer at Blackcore to collaborate and integrate with technology partners such as Cisco and Netcope. It enables us to deploy a trading solution rather than just be one building block of that trading solution. So you take a low latency FPGA, you install it in our Black server, you add Netcope in the background, and all of a sudden you have a turnkey solution that's ready to go, rather than the client having to put it all together themselves, whereas we can collectively work together to do that for them.
completely agree, and I can speak from experience because we've tried the things that Cisco is doing and Blackcore is doing. In the past, we were building our own FPGA cards, and customers were asking us, for optimizing the servers, and we just didn't want to do that. It's too hard, too cumbersome. So we are very happy to collaborate and get the best in the industry to fill in the missing pieces and focus on what we do best.
Yeah.
And I think it can actually apply to the clients as well. So just rely on the vendors who you are best in class, and focus on your key know-how, which is how to trade, how to make money trading on the financial exchanges. So that should be your focus, not how to write a feed handler or how to build an FPGA card or an ASIC. It's not your primary focus.
No.
As Adam said a moment ago, you kind of, when you've got partnerships going, you can create a turnkey solution. So when someone looks to regenerate or rebuild their financial trading network and processing units, you can sort of look and say, well, this company's partnered with this company and this company's partnered with this company. This must be the way forward, because at least then I don't need to go away and do my own due diligence on what's going to work together or what isn't going to work together. We've already done all of that. By working together as a partnership, we've been able to find, I guess, the not liabilities, but the negatives, and work through them to a point where it doesn't become an issue anymore as well. Whereas when you're building something yourself and you're going, right, well, I want to choose vendor A, vendor B, and vendor C for each of my different components, you've got some unknowns in there. So you kind of almost get a support framework as well developed.
Yeah, we've done the streamlining on behalf of the clients already, so they don't have to. That's great for everyone involved.
I think that's so important, and Milan brought up a point that I really enjoy, is everyone wants to be actually focusing on what they do as a business, and the investment organizations, the traders, they want to just be focusing on what they want to do as well. So when they can come to you guys and kind of know that, as you said, Dan, there's this framework, and Adam, as you said, there's people that that they can rely on throughout the whole chain. Everything becomes streamlined and everyone's life becomes easier, while also increasing efficiency is always going to be at the heart of everything. And if you can do that just with your product suite as well, even better. Adam, can you tell me a bit more about the future-proofing aspect when it comes to the hardware and what you guys are working on over at Blackcore, please?
Sure. So we concurrently develop with Intel and AMD to be in line with their generational changes as their products evolve, as do ours. So with the advent of DDR5 and PCIe 4, we're going to be having our products released more or less at the same time as they are.
And from a Cisco perspective, so similarly to the way Blackcore work, we're going to be working in lockstep with Intel and AMD as they're developing their CPU chips. All of the Cisco smart NICs at the moment are not based on generation 3 of PCIe. However, we're going to be working with our hardware vendors like Blackcore to ensure that we're ready for supported versions of the generation 4 standard to increase both bandwidth as well as speed between the CPU and the NIC card.
Guys, thank you so much for your time. I think that is all we have time for. It's been really fascinating going from the beginning of the system all the way up and kind of putting these building blocks together to kind of create the best in class system you can. So guys, thanks very much. And also to our viewers as well, you can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com and of course YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you in the comments. So guys, once again, thank you very much and goodbye.